Hello everybody from everywhere in the world, wherever you are, wherever it is morning or noon or afternoon or evening. Welcome to this webinar. This is organized by Expert Marketeer. Expert Marketeer is an online marketing book club and forum, and it wants to promote lifelong learning and is also organizing the marketing book of the year. And actually today we are talking with the Silver Award winner of the marketing book of the year of last year, Sean Moffitt. He made a famous and bestseller book on Wiki-brands. Sean, are you there?
I am here. Hi Mark, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Sean is co-author of this book, Wiki-brands, together with Mike Dover. Sean is today president of Wildfire Strategy and Communications, but is actually internationally known, an internationally known speaker on everything that has to do with branding and web and business models in general. Is that correct, Sean?
Yeah, you've got it right so far, Mark.
And is there more we have to say about you or to present you?
No, I guess I'm located from Canada, so I know Expert Marketeer has a fairly international profile of the audience. So if there were any Canadian language things that slip out, it's because I'm from Toronto.
So okay, so let's move to the subject of today. We will talk about Wikibrands and the book of Sean, and you are invited, all of you, wherever you are, to ask questions. You can do so by chatting with us and asking questions, but first you have to register to Ustream. We are on Ustream here, and if you register on Ustream, you can ask questions, and I will ask these questions to Sean. So everybody is welcome to help me interviewing Sean on the subject of Wikibrands. But we have already a number of questions to start with, and Sean, you will not be surprised that the first question is as simple as, what the hell is a Wikibrand? Is that another nice name for something that we know already?
I hope not. I hope we had a fresh argument on the world, Mark. We did struggle in the early days when we actually launched the book Wikibrands. We thought to ourselves, what do we call this? Do we just call it engagement? Do we call it, the new revolution of branding? What do we call this? Because as half of my life as a T-shirt working in digital companies, and half of my life as a marketing and strategy person, we tried to blend the two things. And perhaps not surprisingly, we worked a lot with Don Tapscott, who wrote a book called Wikinomics. And so the intent was quite clear that 4 years later that we would write the marketing and sales version of Wikinomics, which is now called Wikibrands. So, and really what a Wikibrand is any kind of organization that is concerned about how their brand is represented in the world, and that truly does engage using all the modern technology tools at play to actually engage with their audience and provide a better customer experience. End point.
Anyway, yeah. Nice. In your book, you're describing the evolution of brands in general, and I saw also that you were talking about love marks. Actually, love marks is the definition of brands that was invented by Kevin Roberts. And just for everybody online now, I'm the CEO of Saatchi Brussels. Kevin Roberts is my worldwide boss. So I
must jump in and say that I'm a big fan of love marks. When I was at P&G in my formative branding days, I think I read that book and have it pockmarked with yellow or post-it notes all over the place. So I enjoy the read. Yeah,
but in your book you're explaining that Wikibrands is kind of the next generation of brands, and its love marks was the kind of brands that we had during the last 10 years. So now we are going to Wikibrands. What's the difference between a love mark and a Wikibrand then?
I mean, certainly when I look at what Kevin had to say about love marks, there are various threads in his argument about needing to have a conversation, engaging your audience, which rang true to me. I think I think when Kevin wrote it, and I can't remember the exact year, but I want to say it was maybe late 90s or early 2000s. It was probably, branding still was probably much more of a, hey, look at me, look at me. Don't I appeal to your value set? Please revere me. And I think now we're starting to see all over the place that you know, at no other time have customers had more control, and it really comes down to 4 or 5 things. 1, they have a shortage of time. 2, they have a shortage of attention. And 3, there is an absolute glut of media and products on the marketplace. So not surprisingly, they're turning to their friends, their family, their colleagues to actually learn what kind of brands that they want to either aspire to or buy. And so I think that the whole notion of, you know, we are the brand, we are the temple, you will come to worship at my temple has changed radically over the last 10 years to be much more of a, no, you know what, this is the town commons, this is the common square that we all do this together, and we hope you like us, and hopefully you'll shop at our stand.
Yeah. Do I understand it well if I say that it has to do that not only in marketing but in society as a whole, we are going from a bottom-down society to a bottom-down and from a top-down to a top-down and bottom-up society. So consumers, but also citizens, they want to be engaged, they want to participate, and they want to participate in a brand also. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I mean, it's not strictly marketing, that's for sure. I think there's an element of that in terms of marketers could be this real force of not only producing better communications and marketing, but also a force for how to change culture and how companies work if they decide they want the job. But I would say, you know, you look at some industries that have pretty much lived by the same code for the last 100 years, and you're seeing the formula for how they work is changing. I usually tell my audiences when I speak, there are 5 industries that are still only seeing the first signs of radical changes happening with their industry. And those 5 would be finance and banking, education, healthcare, energy, and public service and government. And you're just starting now to see the same changes happening to those industries that happened to media and entertainment 5, 10 years ago. So it'll be interesting. You know, certainly my book will be out of date in 2 years for sure, because radical changes will have happened that will have kind of overtaken some of the pearls of wisdom that I put in my book.
We will go to, you have a PowerPoint presentation, so we can go through your presentation in a moment. But before we start, a few questions that I have here already that I got from people listening to us. Can every brand or product become a wiki brand, or is it easier if you are in certain categories of the market?
Yeah, I mean, I always point to a couple of favorite brands of mine that have taken a fairly commodified category and turned them into wiki brands. You know, WD-40. I'm not too sure if all your listeners know or viewers know what WD-40 is, but it's a lubricant that I know is probably the most popular one in North America. I mean, they have over 300,000 people that are part of their fan club. So as crazy as that may be, as idiosyncratic as that may be, you know, and I must admit I'm part of their club as well, because I'm just fascinated. Every week I get a new email from other customers that have said, here's yet another way on how to use WD-40. So it's quite dysfunctional, but you know, if a lubricant can do it, I imagine most other brands can do it out there.
Yeah. All right. Let's go. You have a presentation there. I don't know exactly what slide is on for the moment.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if it pops up here, Mark. I'm seeing it in my screen. So
we are on slide 8.
The miracle of technology here. I'm not seeing it on here. Yeah, maybe if I try to blow this up here.
Okay, can I let me see?
Just give me 1 sec, guys.
Yeah, okay. You don't see your own slides.
It's just I see something on a really small thumbnail, but I don't see yet. Let's see if this works. It's always the technology type route, right?
Yeah. Well, I hope it. Can we do something about it? Actually,
service.
I'm just waiting for that to boot up potentially. So I can certainly, if you describe the slide to me, I can certainly speak to it.
Well, let's maybe go directly to an important part of your book is where you are presenting the flirt model. Huh? I think that's a very important part where you explain how can a brand become a wiki brand. So can you explain to us what is this flirt all about?
Yeah, no, we wanted, my personal chagrin, I guess, is I read a lot. I read a lot of what goes on in the category and all the thought leadership, and there's some really, really good stuff. I mean, I'm a big fan of Clay Shirky and a number of others. But one of the challenges I have is if I'm sitting in my old shoes as a client marketer from 10 years ago, I want somebody to paint a roadmap for me that says, I get it. It's no longer a question of why I need to do this. I think for most people that argument's already been won. I think more of the challenge is, what do I have to do and what sequence do I have to do it and who's doing it really right, which is what the flirt model is all about. We identified 10 steps that upon looking at what the top companies were doing, really they did these 10 things and they were almost sequential in terms of how they did them. And so FLIRT is an acronym that represents 5 different words: focus, language, incentives, rules, and tools. And so I'll describe those quickly. I mean, focus, you know what, as much as you can get lucky and you can have a cat falling off a TV and get millions of hits for whatever you're trying to do on YouTube or wherever, really the strategists still have a role to play here. This is not just serendipity happening. There are ways to pull together what your brand wants, what your business wants, what your organizational culture can support, and what, probably most importantly, what your customer wants. And if you can actually strategize and pull that together, great. So there's the focus part. Language, certainly if your customer is queen, content in this world is king. So there's a tone part to language. There's also a content frequency, variety, and depth or quality. So that's the language part. Incentives. I find one of the big things that marketers do is build it and they will come. And unfortunately, if you don't keep stoking the interest of particularly your most interested customers, you'll find that they'll be involved for a month, 2 months, maybe 3 months, and then most communities die on a vine without the ability to actually incorporate some incentives. So, and I don't necessarily mean monetary incentives. These could be intrinsic incentives, extrinsic or explicit ones.
Okay.
More things out there don't have rules. Employees don't want to blog or Facebook posts. Yeah.
Toon ik het terug de slide. De flirt. This one.
Tools. I could come up with 5 different tools out there you could use. Probably the least important part of the flirt model is what the technology is, because we know it's going to roll over the next few years anyway. But it is important to spend as much time on your website as you do on social media. You definitely need a strong home base if you're going to actually go out and visit these other on the social web.
All right. Can we come back on a few points of this flirt model? Focus, for instance. Can you give an example of a wiki brand today which has the right focus, and what is that focus then? Hello?
I just missed that last part, Mark. Can you say it again?
So the first step in your flirt model is focus. Can you give an example of a brand that changed from focus or that has a very good focus today? What does that mean really? What is a good example of the focus of a brand?
We have other samples that maybe aren't so obvious, but I'll pose the one that frequently gets brought up, and I do go back to it. They're brilliant because they have great focus, and that's Dell. I mean, Dell for me does more activity across more things, and yet still has a focus about what they're doing. So when we talked to Dell, they're quite explicit and they're quite humble about it. They said, look, we don't think we understand this full thing yet either. And these are people that have millions upon millions of people that have joined their communities. And for them, there's 3 or 4 different types of focuses all their different communities had, from customer service being one of their biggest prongs, probably their biggest one, to ideas to incorporate into their product development, to user applications. So once they launch products, how do they actually interact, produce stuff that can help Dell out? So they're quite strategic in terms of what they're trying to achieve with their different community areas. And if you do go to Dell's centralized place where all their communities exist, there is a structure to, look, if I'm a customer, I know where I need to go here for whatever I'm interested in. So they're one great example of somebody that does a lot of stuff, but still has this guiding focus. I think somebody that is just very crystal clear in terms of the one thing they do, and I think they do it in Europe just as well as they do here in North America, is Pepsi Frito-Lay. Their snack franchise has benefited greatly from crowdsourcing different creative concepts from advertisers. And to use a North American sport, American football, for the last 3 years, Doritos has asked their customer base to produce great ads for Doritos for the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl, I think the average 30-second spot on the Super Bowl is about $3 million now. So their ad will be seen by more than anybody in North America in a given year on this one particular sporting event. And for the last 3 years, they've taken a user-generated idea and made a commercial out of it. And perhaps not surprisingly, for the last 3 years, of the 52 ads that show up in the Super Bowl, Doritos has been known to be either number 1, number 2, or number 3 in terms of the most creative, and the one that produces the most post-watching awareness behind the campaign. So for those that don't think user-generated content is probably up to the level of professional content, they may be right, but amongst all that coal is some brilliant diamonds that Doritos has been able to focus on and say, this is what we want out of this is what we're doing, and their customers have rallied around it.
All right. Is it fair to say that focus relates also to the mission and the vision of a brand, and that the first thing to do there is to have a proper internal communication program so that everybody in the company is convinced about what is this mission and what is this focus, and what is my company's goal in the first place?
That's a great point, Mark, because I think at least from a SKU standpoint, marketing has become much more of a game of what you do as a brand as opposed to what you say you do. And so if you can't credibly back it up with employees actually living up to that brand experience, then you're in a bit of trouble in a social media world. So I would even take it further. It's not even internal communications. It's probably more basically internal values. Does everybody in that company realize the 4 or 5 reasons why that company exists and why they decided to join that company? I saw a great stat the other day, and I haven't done the forensics on whether or not it's a true stat or not. You might have heard the same one, but they talked about companies. Companies are 5 times more likely to be successful financially if they have an ingrained set of values that people live by, which seems like a tough one to prove. But if it is true, I would buy it. I think. You look at a lot of the companies that we interviewed for our book, there is a collective sense of this is what we do here.
Okay, last question on that focus point, because I have a few questions on the point of the culture of a company. So that, and you were already talking about it, if you want to become a wiki brand, it needs a certain culture in the company, and that's the first thing that you have to do, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I found it interesting because we essentially picked 100 companies for a book that we studied, and we said they do a really good job. I wonder how they operate on the inside. And one of the interesting insights, and me being a populist probably didn't think this was going to be true, but I would say about 95 to 98% of the companies that we studied, the CEO was either a raving champion or at least a tacit approver and applauder of what was going on. So essentially, that told us, if you can't get your CEO, and by virtue of that, your senior executive on board to what you're doing in terms of engagement, in terms of greater customer experience, you're really going to be challenged to do anything great. I feel for these people that run these beta projects in these companies and say, you know what, if we only prove this in beta, we'll be able to roll this out across the entire company. And in some respects, they're working against a culture that's against them. There are groups of people that, let's be honest, if you are a CMO, if you are a CEO, you're likely over 40 years old, and your career has likely not been built on great social media or great deep engagement with your customer. And so this is very much a foreign concept that's threatening to a lot of these type of people. And so I find it marvelous when you do find CEOs that haven't grown up in digital culture, but tend to have the pin drop and get it at some point. So culture is massively important. I look at Zappos, for example. More than 40% of Zappos' employee workforce is actually active tweeters, publicly acknowledging the fact that they tweet as well. So a great example of how employees can actually create a really, really big digital footprint once they rally around the values.
Good, thank you for that. So let's move on to the second element of your FLIRT model, is language. Language it's all about content, and it's all about delivering content nowadays. It's all about moving from the language in the factory to the language and the emotions, I guess, from the consumer. That's what we are talking about?
Yeah, I mean, we should co-author a book together, Mark. You couldn't have expressed it better, I think. I think there's a couple of highlights I would put on content and language. There's a great quote in our book from James Cherkoff, who said, look, consumers, even if they like what you're saying, if they don't like how you're saying it, you're going to be challenged in this world. And there are way too many corporate blogs and corporate news updates that kind of masquerade as sanitized press releases, as opposed to something that was much more human or conversational that people may actually repeat to other people. The other thing I would say on content, and I'm a bit controversial with some of my peers, everybody agrees you have to have great quality content. I talked to a number of expert bloggers the other day, and they said the average amount of time it takes them to write a blog post is 2 to 6 hours, which may surprise people because their average blog length is maybe 200, 300 words. It doesn't seem that difficult, but to write a good blog post takes time. But the other thing I'd say is frequency. Frequency and being out there on a 24/7 basis is crucially important on a content front. The average lifespan of a tweet is about 12 minutes. The average lifespan of a Facebook post is about 80 minutes. So if you're only doing one post a week, a day, you're probably missing out in terms of being relevant to your customer base for a good proportion of the week. So some people will disagree with me on this, but I do think there is an absolute minimum on frequency that you should be posting your content.
Yeah, okay. Well, I agree on that. I think it's a brand should be alive every day, and you should make sure that you're talked about every day. So it's indeed about delivering content every day, and what we say with Love Marks and with Wikibrands also, it's make sure that you have enough people to work to keep it alive, because there's a lot of work to do to follow the consumer every day and to answer, actually, because you have to answer what he's thinking about every day. So you should have a kind of social listening system, so to feel what they are discussing and to react much more than to give top-down messages.
I fully agree. I think one of the more important titles in a company now is, and I'm shocked by how few companies outside of Silicon Valley have adopted it, as the community manager. For me, they are almost the COO of what's happening on the web. And they tend to be young. They tend to have a lot of Renaissance skills, but they punch well above their weight. So for people out there, I would highly champion hiring a community manager to triage and be the ombudsman and be a champion for what you're doing on the web and have that consistent focus.
All right, so we had focus with language. A very interesting third element of your model I found was the incentives. And I have the feeling that's maybe something we forget about is to give incentives to our consumers. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the three kind of incentives and give some examples of the kind of incentives that you are thinking about?
Yeah, and I guess I'll use Kiva. I don't know if everybody knows Kiva, but it is a micro lending company that or organization that essentially how it works is you give money to entrepreneurs in developing world countries. They use that startup money to produce textiles or whatever. They sell their goods, and whatever they make in terms of money, they give back the initial investment. So Kiva is a great example of pulling on all three of the levers that I talk about in the book in terms of incentives. And when I say incentives, we're not talking pay per post. Very controversial. I'm going to pay bloggers to actually blog about my brand and say great things about it, whether they like it or not. You will be found out in about 3 hours if you try to do that, and many people have tried to do that. Thankfully, most of that's going away. I'd say the three levers that you do have to pull in terms of incentives. First of all, there's the intrinsic incentives. People love to join communities because they feel a shared sense of values. There's a group of like-minded people coming together here in support of a cause. And when I think about it, I think, wow, you know what? It's so good that millions of us around the world are actually giving $50, $100 to be part of something that is bringing up people that are in much less advantaged parts of the world. So it pulls on my intrinsic lever. My extrinsic lever, let's be honest, and I think the social web, particularly Twitter, I would say, there's a lot of narcissism out there, and it's just a native human instinct. We want to actually be stroked by our peers and say, you know what, you're a really good person, or you're brilliant. And so extrinsic incentives really pull on the lever of ego. I'm being validated by my peers. And so that could take the form of being on a leaderboard. That could be on the form of, we're going to post you on our front page and you are our featured customer of the day. And from a Kiva standpoint, I mean, it's so seamless for me to actually say to other people through their website, hey, I'm actually doing this. I'm supporting Kiva. You should too. And extrinsically, maybe it's ego. Maybe I just want to feel validated that I'm doing the right thing. But I love the fact that other people know that I'm affiliated with Kiva. And then the final thing is, at some point in time, if you give enough effort to a company, if you're doing videos, if you're doing guest blog posts, if you join their community and providing answers to other customers, you're going to have an expectation that you want to get something back. And this isn't money. It could be goods. It could be, if you're a consumer packaged goods company, it'd be nice to have something to surprise me. Maybe a package of goods that show up on my doorstep. The number one thing that we found with customers was not necessarily goods or money. It was actually being invited to events that the company takes on. And so if I look at Lego invites, their top 30 customers around the world to come to, I guess they're just outside Amsterdam, to actually, come to Lego and actually explore and work with co-developers and stuff. So it's brilliant. They end up being super committed without any realization of monetary compensation.
Yeah, I see what you mean with the explicit motivation, but is there not a danger that this invites people to do it just for this explicit motivation or for the reward that they get, much more than really have their opinion and their participation? Isn't there a danger that it becomes, to put it black and white, a kind of promotion and no more than that?
Yeah, it's a really good point, Mark. I think there is a skew here. I mean, I think 2 years ago we found, at least on Twitter, there's a whole bunch of people that I didn't even know what the product was about or what the company was about, but they wanted you to join as a follower, and it gave you a chance to actually win an iPhone, an iPad, what have you. I think those schemes have become so overblown, people don't believe them anymore. And B, even if you were going to try them, they probably don't produce the benefit that you want to produce. If it's purely transactional on social media, very tough to justify over time how that makes for a good investment. You want people committed to you for more ulterior reasons than just, what am I going to get at the end of the day? So yeah, I'd say You know what? Just I would say that there is a hardcore group of people. Let's call it the 1%. The 1% really does need to have your focused attention and at some point in time incentives. If they're willing to engage with you on such a deep, deep level, you should surprise them. They shouldn't ask for it. You should surprise them with some type of incentive that's more explicit.
Okay, thank you. So focus, language, we had incentives. So we move on to the fourth element of your model, which is rules. Rules, guidelines, training. In your book, you're describing this as this is how we do things. You mean this is how we do things inside the company and also in our discussions with our clients?
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you a question, Mark. At Saatchi, do you guys have either international rules or rules to govern kind of digital engagement for Belgium?
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, I think, let's have the conversation, but I think they function as two things. They function as parameters or bumpers. You know what? We accept a certain amount of types of content or types of activity that people can do. Beyond that, we're not comfortable with that, and different companies will have different bubbles in terms of how broad or how small that range is. So in some respects, it allows their employees to go, look, I have a clear understanding of what's being asked of me or required here, and I feel comfortable with the fact that I can actually participate without getting in trouble. So they do act as parameters. My hope is that the best rules that I've seen act also as directions. You know what? I'm not going to tell you necessarily, but from a style standpoint, from the fact that we all buy into these values, this is the tone of voice and content that you're going to see out of, X company on a day-to-day basis, even though 50 of us may contribute to the blog. And so, even though the company might not be going through the best times right now, I think the best set of rules that I've ever seen, and I read maybe 150 of them as we wrote the book, Kodak's rules. Kodak has the most compelling, the most balanced set of rules and guidelines that I've seen of any other brand. Not surprisingly for Kodak, they're visual, so I find most of these rules are written by lawyers that, dead to rights, most employees will never read because they are just so Melba toast dry. Kodak's is really good. The other one I would point to is the U.S. Armed Forces. Not surprisingly, they're a very regimented top-down organization. Their social media rules have a very flowchart driven, if our customer says this, these are the 3 different options. Where do you go from there? So there's various ways to do rules, but I guess the biggest point I would make is most of you don't have rules out there. The great majority of, certainly half of large companies and most small companies don't have rules. And therefore, you're really in the Wild West when it comes to if your employee picks his nose, puts it on a pizza, and then throws a YouTube video up on it. Do you have anything to actually look back on and say, look, this is the type of behavior we frown upon here? I'm not too sure.
Yeah, so if we start from the point of view, yes, I don't have these rules, and I think you're right, and in a lot of companies, people or the marketing people or the people on the board, they don't realize that they need these rules. So suppose we don't have these rules in this company, in my company, where should I start to install these rules? How do you do that? Is that we sit together with a few people and we invent the rules, and then we say to everybody, this is it, this is how you have to deal with this, or how do you do this?
I'm going to mention 2 or 3 things here. First of all, there's research that says if the employees themselves have a hand in writing the rules, maybe not initially authoring them or setting the vision, but certainly have a hand in providing feedback to those rules, you're much more likely to get buy-in at a grassroots level. So that would be one thing I would say. At some point in this process, employees should be able to have some input in terms of what's right or what's wrong before those rules are set in stone. I think 2 is beyond the rules themselves, there needs to be a support network of training and people you can go to when you get into trouble or when you have some vexing questions. I would say personally right now, 15% of my time, 15% of my time when I walk into companies and consult is on this very topic. How do we establish rules? But more importantly, how do we plan scenarios? Like, can we predict the 10 scenarios my company either can capitalize on or will get in trouble with if we couldn't respond quickly to? And we actually work with companies to actually identify what those are and then actually have people perform in real time, much like you would in the real world. What would your response be, and what would be the expected reaction amongst your audience? And it's interesting to see in a scenario environment what disasters you could possibly do. So I would strongly encourage, bring experts from the outside, probably like your agency as well, Mark, to actually provide scenarios, provide quick damage control when things go wrong, and on the good side, capitalize on opportunities when they happen quickly.
Okay, so focus, language, incentives, rules, and the last point in your model is to have the tools. It speaks for itself. I guess that when you want to be organized as a wiki brand, you should have the appropriate tools to talk and to talk with your consumer and to have them participate in your company. The funny thing is that I found it clever that you mention it as the last point and not the first point of your model. It seems to me that for you also it's, yes, of course it has to be there, but it's not the most important thing.
Yeah, you've set me up well here, Mark, and I think it's to both of our benefits, because I'm a marketer true and true. I used to be a client marketer. Now I'm more on the service consulting and now author side. But what's been true 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and is as true now, is the most important thing to get social media working for your benefit, to get word of mouth going, to have great digital engagement. And we actually did a survey on this. We actually surveyed some enlightened digital folk. Even though they were ensconced in technology, the number one thing they mentioned was the power of a great idea. And so, you know, it goes to ideas, to the people that you get involved, to the culture of your company. Number 10 on our list, so this dropped down to about 10, was the types of tools and technology you use, which was refreshing to see, because I think people understand, look, I can achieve my goals from a number of different ends, and maybe it's better to use Facebook versus Twitter versus YouTube versus any of these things. But probably more important to me, how do I encase this thing in an idea that is just so motivating and compelling that people are going to want to repeat it? I call it the 4-second mom test. You know, if you can get your mom excited and she can understand what you're trying to do in 4 seconds or less, you've probably got a really good idea. And sometimes it's maybe not the role depending on who your consumer target is. But technology should be, I'll state it plainly, technology should be the afterthought for having a great strategy, a great idea, and some of these other things that we previously talked about. And I find the other thing on technology is we've fallen in love with social media. You know, 5 years ago when I was pitching word of mouth and people were like, wow, you can cultivate word of mouth. I know it somehow happens, but you can actually do this. We've gone from that era to the point where everybody thinks that they need to be on social media without really having a driving motivation for the reason why. And it's lending to a lot of people spending way too much time and attention on creating immaculate looking Facebook pages that don't ladder up to any singular brand objective or business objective that they're chasing. So, so it has become a little bit of a snake oil type of industry, I find.
Okay, thank you. I'm repeating my question to the people listening. If you have questions, please ask them and chat with us. I have a number of questions here that relate on two more subjects that I would like to discuss with you, Sean. First, a number of questions have to do with what are the benefits of being a wiki brand in the first place. Second question after that, second question is, how do we measure things? And can you say something? I don't know if you have slides on this benefits thing, and also on how do we measure things, measurement of Wikibrands. But the first point, what are the benefits of being a wiki brand? Are we making more profit in the end, or is it just because marketing people like this?
Yeah, it's probably a blend of both right now. I think we're in this awkward phase where there's enough case studies and enough trials that people have tried that we're probably much smarter than we were 3 years ago. You know, if I look at the number of companies, though, that say I can tie a straight line between I did this on social media and here's what I got as an implicit benefit that I could go to my CEO and say, look, this is success. It's interesting. It does fall under this stream of the more you do it, the more you can tie that straight line on your return on investment. The people that are doing a lot of this stuff, 50% of them, a full 50% of them say, look, I can actually tie a tangible ROI to what I'm doing on social media and good digital engagement to an ROI that we're chasing. For companies that are only testing this stuff out or trialing it out, they're much more negative on that ROI association. So I don't know if it's chicken or egg, but I would say, you know, certainly a leading indicator is the more stuff you do, the more experiments you try, the more you'll end up actually coming to the conclusion that there is actually an ROI. And I think we talk about it in our book, I think it's chapter 4, chapter 5, where there are 6 tangible brand benefits that you can engender for being a good digital engaged brand. Some of them are classic marketing benefits. So one of them we talk about is brand advocacy. It's no longer media trying to find that small group of people that actually care about your product and then them purchasing it. It's much more about trying to find these ambassadors and huge evangelists that want to actually, you know, talk about you proudly to their own social network. So brand advocacy, the number one benefit that marketers steer towards, which makes sense. Second in line, probably in terms of use and influence, is brand perception. Not surprisingly, I think the first occupation or industry that jumped on the power of social media was the PR group. You know, PR understands that their stuff is only as good as their type of stakeholder that wants to take their stories and write about them. So historically, it's always been the journalist. Now it's the blogger and the engaged fan. So perception is another one. Overnight, you can change the perception of a brand for good or for bad online. Some ones that get overlooked or don't get seen as classic marketing benefits. So if you are a CMO or a head of an agency doing this stuff, you know, you can actually become much more powerful in front of a CEO's eyes by actually tackling these 2 or 3 benefits. The first one being brand support. We learned from companies that in certain companies, it costs 40 times less for a customer to answer another customer's question than to actually staff up a customer call center to answer that question yourself. So CFOs love that. I mean, if you can save me cost, I'm all ears. And so, not surprisingly, the most tangible ROI-driven social media initiatives are those that are customer service-based. So that's one area. Brand content was the 4th benefit we talk about in the book. You know, as Nike mentioned, you know, there's about 10 million joggers that buy Nike shoes for every 1 employee at Nike that works on jogging. And some of them are crazy, I'm sure, but amongst all those 10 million, I'm sure there's a number of people that could produce great content for you. So that was number 4. Let's see if I remember all 6 of them. I guess one that we talked about in the book is brand serendipity. You can never plan for it. You can't tell the CEO it's going to happen, but all of a sudden you post something and it goes crazy, or you end up on a popular TV show because traditional media has picked up on it. It falls under the banner of crazy stuff happens online sometimes. And the last one, and it's probably a nature of the arrogance sometimes of our industry, is brand insight. You know, if you genuinely involve your customers and genuinely listen to what they're having to say, you can actually get some great insight to the point where, you know, Dell's quantified it. Dell now launches products 2 to 3 weeks earlier in time because they can more effectively and efficiently get consumer feedback quickly through the tools of social media. So those are the 6. And some of them I'd say brands pretty much get. I'd say the last 4 that I mentioned, brands either dismiss or negate to actually look at.
Thank you for that. We have them all on our slide number 9 for all the people listening to us. The key wins of being social and to have your consumer participate into your brand. It has to do with perception, with brand support, delivering brand content by your consumers, having the most overlooked, you say, is the brand insights and the brand insights that it gets from the consumer. Obviously, I think the most important, if I pick one out of these 6 benefits, is brand advocacy, that you have ambassadors, and that I think communication is all about creating ambassadors today, and not having to tell the story yourself, but having your clients telling the story to their peers. You agree?
Oh, Mark, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I love to hear it from a guy who's running Saatchi, right? I mean, I think there shouldn't be a threat to the advertising business. In some respects, it's just a higher order and higher magnitude of being great storytellers. I mean, I think 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, and it's as true today, you know, great storytellers will succeed in this marketplace. If you can tell a story that resonates with people, that people want to take as their own and maybe add their own elements to that story, you're going to create ripples in this marketplace. And I think, you know, historically, and I think it's true in some respects now, agencies have been the great storytellers of our business. So I hold out hope that, you know, just what you said can be embraced by a lot of your agency peers. And I'm not too sure what it's like in Belgium, but I'd say the ad biz and the communications biz has been slow to actually, you know, pick up on this change in technology.
I agree with that criticism, but I think it's changing fast now. I think agency people at Saatchi and other agencies, we realize that it's all about doing and not saying. As you said already earlier, campaigns should actually talk about what has been done and what you do together with your consumer, much more than promise or explaining what this brand is all about. It's much more believable if you do it. Related to these key wins, can you say something in general? I know it's difficult, on how to measure and do we have to measure these things? And because the weak point of a lot that has to do with social media, etc., is that yes, how can I prove that? Where are the facts of these actions? How can I prove to my bosses inside the company that this is working and this is effective? What can you say on that?
Yeah, there's almost 2 questions there. I'm going to tackle the measurement one, and I'm going to tackle the how does this resonate inside your company so people look at it that way too, because some of this is perception based. I think the first one, we went into this with open eyes. We studied all these companies, and the interesting thing, the fascinating thing for us was, of the top 100 companies that we studied, we looked at what their core metrics were. So we kind of peeled the layers of the onion and said, look, really, companies, what do you really care about when it comes to digital engagement? And they told us like the 3 or 4 main things they cared about. Well, guess what? Of the 100 companies, you would think maybe you land on a set of 10 metrics that everybody can agree on. They landed on 46 different core metrics. And so, not to encourage illicit drug use whatsoever, but we have this term that we're using now called, you really do have to roll your own. You know, if you build a social dashboard, you just shouldn't take Radian 6's main dashboard as your company's main indicator for what's going on in your company. You should actually think and consider what your key business objectives are and go chase down the source in terms of where to find that measure. I would say from a SKU standpoint, 1 or 2 things. The first thing would be the best people that are doing this are starting to get the fact that this is not a chase for fans and followers and scale. I'll give you a great example. Oreo has done a great job. They have built a universe of about 25 million people on Facebook. At least the last time I checked, it was about 25 million. The challenge I have is the way Oreo is managing their page. You know, if you had an entrepreneur and said, look, we're going to give you 25 million people that like what you do, sign up for your page. Now your job is, what are you going to do with it? I mean, that entrepreneur would be doing cartwheels and be on there every day and providing incentives. And really, Oreo, I think, does kind of a half-baked job in terms of managing that group. So they're great at acquiring people, not great at engagement. And we realize this universe right now is all about engagement. I'm not surprised last year Facebook and Twitter both launched within a 3-month period a a curated universe of the best stories found on Facebook and Twitter, because they realize, look, for a company like ourselves that needs to make money on media, we need to get more people engaged for a longer period of time on my website. And I think companies should take that as their own edict too. Engagement, time spent on my site, what are you doing with my content with other people are much more important than the number of fans or followers that I end up getting. So that's the measurement piece. I hate to say it, but there's no silver bullet. Depending on who you are as a company and depending on which of those 6 benefits you're chasing, you're going to have much different metrics in terms of what you want to look at as measurement. On the other side, I think there's a blend here. People are scared out of their minds in terms of what they need to present in terms of measurement. And we found CEOs, when we interviewed them, had a pretty refreshing take on social media, which surprised us. We thought they'd be resistant. The ones that do it well in the good companies, they said, look, we want to see 3 things of the people managing our social media or digital. One, that intuitively we think those are the right measures we should be measuring. 2, that I know somebody on a fairly regular basis is going to update me on those measures. And 3, that whether we can tie a straight line to ROI or not, that we're actually building momentum and actually those measures are going in the right direction. If you tick off those 3 things, most CEOs will say, I will gladly fund this based on my intuition that says it's only going to get bigger. We need to be doing this, and perhaps more callously, my competitor across the street is doing this, so we need to be involved as well. The last thing I'd say about measurement is just, we talked about telling stories to your customer. You also have to tell stories internally. I find the best ones that do this, celebrate milestones. So you created, your 100,000 tweet, or I'm not too sure what an appropriate milestone might be, but celebrate not only the milestones, but the impact that you're making in social media through individual stories. Because those are the ones that people remember and go, you know what, I can't remember if we got 23% more growth in our website hits or not, but I certainly can remember that story of a woman whose life was transformed by whatever we had done on social media. So sorry to go on about measurement, Mark, but it is one of those things that when people bring up measurement, they usually bring it up for 3 different reasons. 2 are good and 1 is not good. The first one is they do it for business reasons. I want to know how we're doing. They do it for analysis reasons, so I want to know how to be better at it. The one that I hate hearing companies have to deal with is resistance questions. I don't want to do social media. I don't think it's a good thing for my business. And I'm going to serve up measurement as a hurdle, as an obstruction to actually doing more of it because I just don't want to do it in the first place.
Thank you for that, Sean. We are going to the last 5 to 10 minutes of our webinar. I would like to touch on one more slide of your presentation, which is slide number 32, where we will be in 2016. Now, we understood already that you are a clever man. If you now can even explain us where we would be in 2016, that would be marvelous. So, what will happen in the next years? What is the next? Wikibrands? Are we moving to another kind of brands, or will we have Wikibrands for the rest of our lives? What will happen in the next years?
Yeah, well, and if I knew the real answer, if I was totally bang on the answer, I'd probably be very rich right now and be sitting on a beach somewhere earning a lot of money. But I'll give you my best take on it, Mark. And I found it ironic that I think when I started using that slide, we are in our leap year. So this year, February 29th happened. If you think about just what's happened in the last 4 years, it is interesting to think about what are the next 4 years going to look like, because we tend to overestimate how quick the stuff happens in the short term and underestimate how quick the stuff happens in the long term. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but I just think about what we were doing 4 years ago online and how radically different it is right now. My sense is, and I've got a new kind of presentation, maybe I'll come back to Belgium and present it, but I have a presentation on the 125 trends that are going to transform our lives over the next 3 or 4 years. And if I was to bucket those, mobile is going to have a huge impact. The power of context and location and being mobile is going to be crucially important. I see the socialization of entertainment as being important. TV, it's always been a promise. I think we're getting closer to the point in time where Google and Apple TV will go up against Sky TV and some of the providers and actually create this blended universe of socialized content, whether it's on your TV or computer. I think there are some people that, given the power of gaming, given the power of radical new improvements in entertainment technology, that there are going to be these two forces, these people that are Wikibrands that try to engage their audiences through dialogue and conversation and socialness, and they're going to be this other group of people that are going to be at the forefront of new technology and say, look, I don't need to do all this other stuff because I'm going to be so brilliant by the capabilities of three-dimensional TV and augmented reality and a whole bunch of things that I can program ahead of time and don't have to moderate. So it'll be interesting, those two things. And on a negative note, I would say, it's funny, when I talked to Don Tapscott, he loves the brave new world of technology. I mean, we all want to be around for the next 20 years to see it. The one thing he does caution on, which I find interesting for him, who's such a champion, is privacy. Privacy is going to be an interesting piece from a legal standpoint, from a national, who has rights to see your stuff, and from your own personal standpoint, like how much information are you willing to provide people for free? In order to get all this access to Facebook, and there's a reason why Facebook is valued so highly. They know a ton of stuff about you, and so I think that's going to come to a loggerhead in terms of people actually being totally exposed and liable and feeling that risk, and other people that will totally disengage from social media because they don't want to have their privacy invaded. So those are some thoughts in terms of where we're headed, Mark.
I thank you for that, and really it was very interesting, and we thank you for that. I have a few personal questions left for the last few minutes of this interview. Some people are asking, maybe because they are becoming a big fan of you, what is the next book that you're working on, and when will it be published?
I hope my publisher is not watching this, because they'll probably be interested in that comment too. I've been so busy speaking and doing client stuff that it's been kind of refreshing not to have to write for a while. But I probably still got the bug, and I think I've got three different directions, and they're quite personal in nature. I think I'm a huge fan of not-for-profits. I run a Twitter chat for not-for-profits, and so perhaps my next book is going to be called Wiki Causes. So how do not-for-profits tap into this engagement piece and actually build, goodwill and social innovation and all that good stuff. So that's one area. Two, I'm a huge sports and active fan. I run marathons. I do all this stuff. I have an interesting, deep understanding of how sports brands and active brands are using this. And so, we may do like a Wiki Nike or something. And then finally, I'd say, I'm all about foresight now. Wikibrands was very much here's what's happening today, and here's what's happening in a good way. I find there's a tragic loss of being able to predict what's happening next year, 2 years, 3 years from now. And so I'm working with a number of people on just trying to break that DNA and try to actually, in advance, try to figure out where these things are going and what trends you can tap into ahead of time before they actually happen. So those are three different directions on books, Mark, but I'm quite scattered right now.
A lot to do, I hear. One more personal question. I don't know if it's a lady asking you this. What is your favorite holiday destination?
What is my favorite holiday destination?
Yeah, so I said I don't know if it's a lady that asking you this, but somebody is asking, what is your favorite holiday destination?
Nice. That's a good one. I just came back from Norway and I loved it. So I should mention that. Maybe I should mention Belgium just because as a former beer marketer.
That's what we agreed. Thank you.
Nice. Now, as a former beer marketer and purist, I mean, Belgium is the center of the world from a beer standpoint, and I've never been in Belgium actually yet. So maybe that's on my list.
Okay, I think we can conclude now. Sean, I would like to thank you really for this interview and for your comments, and we're looking forward to everything that you will do in the near future, and we will check in 2016 if what you have been explaining is more or less true. To everybody listening to us, I would like to say, if you want more news about Expert Marketeer or about our next webinars, please subscribe to the website of Expert Marketeer and you will hear all about it. We have a next webinar planned in the month of May. We will confirm the right moment, but it will be an interview with Jonathan Baskin, who has written the book Tell the Truth, and everything that has to do with truth and honesty is something I think is becoming very important also. So once again, thank you, Sean. Thank everybody listening to us for this last 50 minutes or so. I wish you all the best in your career and in your lives, and maybe we see each other or we hear each other back in one of the next webinars of Expert Marketeer. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
See and hear you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye now.